Hello, everyone, and welcome to our program, the Creativebug Daily Challenge. And here always is Lucy and Nancy, and I'm Heidi. And so this month's program or challenge that we're working on is the Daily Embroidery Challenge Stitch a Day Sampler. And it's a project brought to us by Rebecca Ringquist. And she was also, I'd love to say, very generous in helping us with the sampler because she didn't have them available in her shop originally. And I guess, Nancy, you reached out to her.
I did, yeah. Because we wanted to follow the Creativebug video directly. When I went to go purchase for us the samplers, they weren't on her Etsy store, and she was super fast getting back to us and listing those. And then we had another hiccup where we didn't order them fast enough and they sold out. So there's a lot of folks that are buying her samplers, and they're seeing a surge. I think with pandemic and quarantine and everybody being home, a lot of folks are getting involved in embroidery, which is extremely exciting to me because this is kind of my wheelhouse, embroidery. So she was extremely gracious, and I'm deeply thankful for her for getting to that so fast. So thank you, Rebecca. Yeah. And I can say I'm having a blast with this. This is so much fun.
I am too, even though I feel like I've had experience with embroidery. These are different stitches. I'm learning new things, and just her approach is different. With actually working with some heavier threads and pearl cotton and stuff. The one thing I just want to say right off the start is I just love her enthusiasm. Like every day starts and she's just like, today's stitch, like she can't wait to talk to you about it. And then yeah, so it's just been a real feel-good thing to be a part of. I mean, not that all the, I mean, they're all are, but
she has that.
I agree with that totally. She's very warm and just
you're gonna love this one.
Yeah, that authentic enthusiasm. You can really tell that this is something that she loves, and this is like her passion. And I gravitate a lot towards folks that are like that with their crafting forums. So I found that extremely relatable. And just the way that she teaches and her, so I'm a longtime embroiderer. I've been embroidering heavily for 8 or 9 years. But I was really only using maybe 4 stitches. And all DMC, floss. It was very specific and very structured in the way that I approached embroidery. And her teaching method and the things that she's teaching and the stitches in this sampler have really pushed me to think outside the box and pushed me outside of my comfort zone in the best way. I feel like this has really helped me grow as an embroiderer, and I'm just having so much fun with it again. It's a blast. So.
Well, I want to really hear from Lucy because we've tried. It took a couple tries to get her on board with doing this challenge.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, I had never done embroidery before. I don't know why. I just grew up doing needlepoint, and that's kind of like what I did. So vastly different. And I've even moved away from needlepoint. So.
Can you say how needlepoint is different, or just include?
Well, needlepoint is on painted on a piece of canvas, varying size mesh, like the finer the mesh, technically the more difficult the needlepoint. And you're just only ever really doing one stitch. There are other stitches you can do, but it's generally not, your creativity there is in the threads that you choose and maybe in doing a few other stitches, but it's almost like paint by number. And so then what it comes down to is the quality of the work you do. There's a real pride there in having the back of your work look the same as the front of your work, I loved her approach here right away, where she's like, the back of my work is not gonna, look look anything like the front. And so I guess I was intimidated by embroidery because of the free formness of it in a way. Like you're just, you don't always have a starting place. You're just doing these stitches. That's actually what I loved though. And I love this teacher specifically for the way she shows you like something that she's sketched in a sketchbook, and then she translates that exact pattern. She's like, and here's what that looks like when I embroider it. And it just that connection between the way that other arts can show up, like in fiber arts, was really neat. And I don't know how you guys knew this would be a good fit for me, but you did, because I couldn't stop. Like I was just obsessed. So I finished it, even though we're at the halfway point. Like I would go to bed and like, did you ever play Tetris and you'd go to bed and you see the tiles like dropping in your head? Like I would go to bed and I would see like embroidery stitches.
My gosh, that's so cool.
I was like a monster. Like, I mean, I'm still like, I've moved on to other things and I'm going around the edges here, but I think a lot of it, if it had been a different teacher, I don't know if that experience would have been the same. As you guys were saying, her enthusiasm is infectious, and I think she really like opens the door for creativity a lot, like, which is what I was so happy to learn about embroidery, is that it's so much, there's so much room for creativity. So it's like painting with thread in a way. But
it is, yeah. And it's like, before this, my idea of like painting with thread was literal thread painting, where you're working with really fine strands, you're doing all long and short stitch, so it's like satin stitch, and you're using dashes of color to paint, so it's more impressionistic in a way. So I never really thought of it as like painting in bold strokes, like I paint with a brush. So watching her samples that she would come, so like every stitch, and I loved this format, and I'm just could not believe that I didn't think about doing this. She shows you how to do the stitch first, and then she shows you examples of how it can change. Where when I teach embroidery, it's always, I'm going to show you what it looks like and show you how all the things you can do with it, and then I'm going to show you how to do it. And it was almost like learning with my style of learning. I really liked that she showed you how to do it first, and then while you're sewing, you can listen to her explain of, how it's going to look different. And that those examples of how it would look different based on the type of fiber you use, or the size of the fiber, or the size of the stitch, or varying the different aspects of the stitch. The one that really struck me was her couching, where she's using these super, super chunky yarns that I had never thought to use before. And the one thing that she said that day that blew my mind was, talk to your knitting and crocheting friends for all of their ends and their like cut off pieces of yarn that they've, they're going to throw away, because it's nothing to a knitter or crocheter. It's more than enough to an embroiderer. I was like, why did I never think of that's like, I feel so silly now, but that's amazing. It's such a good idea. And then proceeded to deep dive into my stash and add some of those yarns into my sampler. So I was like,
I had fun picking out stuff for the couching. And she does, like, I loved that example she showed where she has just done lines of couching on this sampler, and it starts with like really thick yarn, or maybe it starts with really fine and then goes down to really thick.
And that was what actually struck me about some of her other samplers. One of the ones that's circular and the different stitches are split out into like pie slices on that circle. That's the sampler that I model my sampler that I teach after. I do it a little bit differently than she does, but that shape was inspired by her.
Oh, wow.
And she goes from heavy to light, or heavy to thin with those stitches. And that was just so striking to me of like, that's a great way to play with fiber and to play with embroidery of you're doing all these different types of fibers and you get this really spectacular effect. And the way that she does it was also liberating for me, because she's very much of use the colors that you have. If you don't like it, you can always cut it out later, but don't feel a lot of pressure to pre-plan your sampler. And I'm a heavy planner when it comes to embroidery. I spend more time picking out my colors than I do actually working the piece, and that's not a joke. But and that having her be like, just pick the first thing that pops up. God, that was liberating. That felt so good to be able to just pull 30 or 40 bobbins out and then pick whichever one I felt like that day and just use that color. So
I've been trying to stick with like basically, well, I've got like 4 colors in mind. So,
oh, wow.
I'm trying to just work with that because in the past I've done samplers and then I think I got distracted by like a color choice I didn't like. I just didn't go back to it or whatever the reason. I also think this is just more motivating having a class that I go to.
Yeah.
You know, I'm attending this thing basically every day and doing the work. So,
yeah.
What was it? I was thinking something, and now I've lost it. But I did want to ask one thing I can remember. If like you had a favorite stitch or stitches out of the batch we've done so far.
Oh, so many.
I really loved couching. I think we all agree was one of our favorites. I'm looking at my sampler right now in front of me. The chain back stitch, I was really surprised of how much I liked that one. Mine turned out so pretty. And then the wheat ear,
I love the wheat ear.
That was really fun.
Cool. Yeah.
And I did not expect to like that one so much, but that one felt really good. There were a couple stitches that I struggled with. The zigzag chain and the 3-sided stitch. The
3-sided stitch, I kind of ended up doing that differently. I did the up like the zigzag of it almost. I started out doing it her way, and then I would just do the sides of the triangle, and then I went back and did back stitch for the top.
That's a great idea because
you could kind of go about it however you.
Yeah, and she did say that, but I also love the wheat ear. I thought that was a fun one, and then I love the little I love the fly filling where you do that little tacking stitch.
That is really cute.
Or the little powdered filling, the same thing with those things with the tacking stitch, and then you put something else in.
Yeah,
I did. I liked those quite a bit as well. And then the only other one I really struggled with, it didn't come out nearly as close, is the closed buttonhole.
Yeah, mine, I want to redo it.
Yeah, I kind of want to redo my closed button.
And that one, I actually took it out of the hoop to work on it because I couldn't get my needle, you know. Yeah. But one thing I also was challenging was the heavy chain because I wasn't sure if I was going in the right place because that was one thing where I feel like I needed a little more specific direction because she said you go here and then for the next stitch you'll go here and I'm like looking at the screen trying to figure out, well, where is here? And I'm assuming I had
to look somewhere else, I think, online to see if there was like a specific place.
It has a cool effect though.
It does. And the hardest part for me with the heavy chain was actually that I did them out of order because I wanted to use a variegated thread for the heavy chain, but I couldn't quite decide which one that day. So I think that was the one day where I'm like, okay, I'm not going to make my split-second decision. And I had already done the stitches on either side of it, so I was having trouble getting my needle around the chains without catching the stitches the other days. And mine, I am struggling a little bit with following exactly along with her drawing. So the heavy chain is the only one where you can really see the printing behind it, and it bothers me a little bit.
I have a few like that. That would be my one thing about the sampler in general. Like, you know, I have another embroiderer where it's like blue ink on there that and just because it was hard to cover in certain places. But I noticed, like on her example, that's the same, you know.
And that's all the other, because I started diving through hashtags on Instagram for drop cloth samplers and looking at other folks' work because I was just curious. And then I bought, outside of what we're doing, I bought the Milky Way sampler, and I wanted to see what some other folks' color choices for that were. So everybody that I was finding in one place or another, you could see the printing through the stitches.
Yeah.
So
And
I
maybe
was
this
totally
is
okay
part
with
of
that.
the, like with this sampler, because she's writing everything on there too, so it's not so jarring to see these black lines.
Yeah. And that was, I thought, because with me always like labeling stuff and writing on samplers is you have to sew it. You have to stitch that. So I've been in the past really, really hyper particular about covering all of my lines. This one I feel really good with not doing that. It just looks better, I think, without me trying to stitch over her writing. Plus, a lot of it's so small, I would never be able to actually cover it. But yeah, no, I really like the way it looks, and I like the way that she placed the names and how it's really integrated with it's more doodling with stitches that I've never done before. I've never done anything like that. So I really like it. It's just so much fun.
I like how it's organized.
Did you have a favorite stitch, Heidi?
You know, I think really the plain chain was just, and I loved all her examples. Like, I'm so excited to do something with it. It does have that knit look, and it was really fun to do. Like, it's something about the action of it was very satisfying.
Yeah, I do love doing it. It's not hard. It's just, but it looks like more than just.
It has a nice flow, and it's one that I'm able to really do. I mean, not that you have to be so super precise. It depends on what you're doing, but I can be more similar size.
Yeah.
It's easier to get the loops into more of a regular shape. Yeah, like it'd be your equivalent of knitting or crochet gauge. She actually does chain stitch. She works it in the opposite direction of the way that I was taught to
and that too
work it. And that, I know, Heidi, you and I were talking about that as embroiderers of like, this way is so much easier. So much easier. So the way that I had been taught to do it was to start with a loop, and then to chain them together, you push your loop up in the middle of the loop that you just made. So you're making loops going this way, where with her way, you sew a tack stitch, and then you weave your needle through the tacking stitches and through the loops on the chain, which was, I got a lot more regular results, and the thread lays flatter and it looks nicer when you do it that way versus when you do it the way that I was taught to do it. So I enjoyed that enormously. I thought that was a little bit of a revelation for me early on. So
another one of my favorite things about this whole experience, and she actually comments on it, I love the sound of the needle going through. And I love the fact that you can hear it on hers as well. And then at one point she's like, "Don't you just love that sound?" And I do love that sound. It's just so satisfying. I don't know.
It is. It's that pop when your needle goes through the fabric, and it's
great sound.
It's a great sound. I had stopped hooping my fabric that tight so I would get that pop, because for a while when I was stitching, I was getting a lot of puckering if I would hoop my fabric that tightly. This way that I've found with having the piece of fabric, so she sends you the sampler and then you back it with another piece of fabric. That actually is keeping me from having too much puckering.
Is it? That's good. I have some puckering on some of my heavier. Where did I do? Like on the powdered filling and the heavy chain. I think I got, oh well.
I have a little bit for the closed buttonhole and the arrowhead stitch, but I also looked at it and was like, oh, a zigzag stitch puckers just as much in hand stitching as it does in machine stitching. At least it's not me. So I was a little salty about that when I finished that one of like, zigzag stitches, why? My own little growling.
Like zigzag chain. Like at first I didn't, but like I'm looking at it and I like the look of it, and I'm like, I think it just is something I have to practice more.
I know I wouldn't be able to just do that without going back and.
No, I cut that out 3 times before I got something that I liked. So that was the one that I fully struggled with the most and fought with the most, but still not hot about it. But I think it would help if I sat down more with just like a blank piece of fabric and just started sewing some of these stitches and not trying to follow. Because following the lines is actually super, super helpful, and I really like it. But I think having done them and having learned them, the practice would be better if I didn't have a drawing to go off of.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And she said that for the zigzag chain, she said she's did it a different way than it's traditionally done. So
She did,
I went online to try and look how it's normally done, and I just was like, that makes no sense to me.
Yeah. I've never seen zigzag chain stitch before. This is the first time that I've seen it. I actually don't think that I went and looked for tutorials on these stitches at all. I think I just went with the videos, which is a first for me. Usually I do more.
Yeah. Well, it was all new to me, so I just wanted to see.
That's a good thing. You know, going out and looking at other resources is always a positive. So
yeah, but I mean, I always was like, no, I like her way.
Yeah.
She teaches it well. Yeah. So thank you guys for persevering with this one. And
yeah,
thank you for
now it's like I just think the possibilities are, you know.
That was, we talked before recording of like, what are we going to do with these when they're done? Because I know I get that question a lot when I teach embroidery as a program. But like, I've always used them as like wall hangings or like tablecloths and stuff like that, altar cloths when I was a practicing pagan or things like that. This one, I think I'm actually going to make into a project bag.
I like that idea.
For embroidery, not necessarily, because I mean, I have a million project bags for knitting and crochet, but this one is going to be for embroidery.
Yeah.
Because I found a lot in looking through Instagram on the tags for the drop cloth samplers, I was finding a lot of folks finished projects that were turned into like bags or pin cushions or ornaments or things that you use on a daily basis. Because for me, a lot of my embroidery is just like, it's sacred. It stays on my wall. I don't want it to get ruined. But this, I'm like, no, let's take this out and, you know, actually.
That's a cool idea to have it being a project bag, because you have like sample stitches when you're like trying to
yeah, it's like a reference guide on the outside of your bag.
Right? So love that.
Because for the longest time, the sampler that I wanted to do was more like a book. So it was pieces of fabric that I'd embroider on, and each page would be a different stitch. And then I'd bind them all together in a book. But that's, you know, something that's going to sit on my shelf and I'm only going to look at when I need inspiration or I'm looking for a stitch. This I'm going to take it everywhere whenever I'm embroidering. So I'm excited about that.
Well, and just one last thing that I had to say, I do appreciate her use of showing the sketchbooks that she has, drawings that you were saying. It's inspiring just to be, it's kind of, it's overlapping into just like having fun with a sketchbook.
Yeah.
So
there's not a lot of instances where I find embroidery artists are showing their sketchbooks or talking about their planning process or in any way relating their embroidery to other art forms. A lot of the embroidery I see is just like, it's just, you know, I did a raw sketch and now I'm embroidering it. But with hers, it's actual like pen and marker and paint to paper, and then directly translating that into embroidery, which I think is really cool.
Yeah. I loved the way she made that connection between the two. So I found myself drawing little powdered filling things yesterday. I was like just doodling, and I'm like, what am I drawing? Oh, but I think that, you know, that clicked in my brain because she does. So.
They're just so cute.
I know.
I just like all the little fill stitches.
I know, I do too. I love them. And I love her examples of, here's a piece of found embroidery. I just filled this whole part in with like the seed stitch, and you know, it looks really cool. So.
Yeah, I'm going to pull out a couple of the found embroidery pieces that I have and work on those again, I think, and try to incorporate some of the stuff that I'm finding here into those. And that's
changed
I
how
mean,
I've looked at things. Like we have quilts that are falling apart, and there's some embroidery on them, but I'm like, oh, I could take part of that and, yeah.
this makes me want to do crazy quilting all the more. Like I've wanted to do that for years, and now I'm just like, now is the time.
Yeah, it is the time.
Right now. So it's got my inspiration and my love for embroidery is rekindled. So
All right.
which is a problem for my knitting projects, but I'll get there.
Well, so that's great. So that's the purpose. I think a lot of these classes is to lead you to be inspired beyond just what's being presented there. So
Absolutely.
that's in the making. So
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're at midway. So, well, some of us, some of us have gone all
Lucy,
the
you gotta
way,
figure out
but-
what you're gonna do in the meantime.
I know, I'll figure something out. There's a lot that can be stitched on.
Yes, there is. There's
Mhm.
a lot. But yeah, thank you guys for joining us for our halfway video for Rebecca Ringquist's Creativebug program, Stitch a Day Sampler. We will see you in a couple weeks for our final video where we'll show you our finished samplers. Until we see you guys next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and don't forget to love each other. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.